So I thought what we do in this one here is give you some just landscape ideas, just different things. I'm gonna do a tutorial for you that when I was working on it, really, it kind of opened my eyes to how different the workflow in ON1 2019 really is, with the addition of layers, and then just having layers inside of effects and develop. It definitely changes things. It changes things a lot more than I thought it was going to change things. So I've got a tutorial here that I think it's going to open your eyes and just some whole different things that you can do now that layers are really exposed to you. So let me go ahead. Let me share my screen here. All right. So I'm in 2019 now. I'm going to jump into, so this is actually I'm taking this one from it's actually not even a video from the course. It's like a little bonus that I did. I have a brand new ON1 landscape course out right now. And so I think, and if you don't have the link for it, Michael probably can have it in the chat room there. And raise your hand or say something if you got the course. I'd be interested to hear from people. But I'm gonna kind of borrow a little piece of a tutorial here because I think it really speaks volumes about how different things have changed. So here's a photo. Here's a photo that I'm going to take into edit mode here. And so first thing that I thought about with this was, well, I could crop out the road because I'm not really digging the road up front, but you'll see what happens if I go and I were to crop this photo to the point where I got that road out, to me, it's totally like, it's way too uncomfortably tight down there in the bottom. So I kind of realized I didn't want to crop it. And cloning and healing was going to be a big cloning or healing job for it. And then I realized we have layers over here inside of develop. So I kind of tried something. I created a duplicate copy of the layer here. So I just click on that copy layer icon. And I created a duplicate copy. So now I have, if I go to the move tool, you'll see I have a whole new copy on the top of the layer here. So what I can do from there is, here, let's go ahead. Let's start this one. There we go. So I got my copy. And I can take my masking brush and kind of make the brush really, really big. Just set it to paint out mode. Make sure your opacity is set to 100. And I'm going to paint it all out. Now, I won't really know what I'm painting because as soon as I paint it, it'll go away, but I have the same exact layer underneath it. So I'm not going to really know what I was painting. So what I usually did is I just kind of come in here and turn that bottom layer off. So now I'm painting out this top layer like so. And just use a big soft edge brush there. If I painted too far, then you can hold down your Option or Alt key. I'm actually going to hit the left bracket key, make my brush a little bit bigger. Hold down your Option or Alt key. You can bring some of that back. And then let that go. And then just, again, kind of finesse my way to get rid of that. And then paint out the road in the foreground here. Like so. So I don't know if you know where I'm going with this yet, but let me go ahead and let me turn on that bottom layer. So now I've got two images. I've got the full layer on the bottom, and I've got just this green patch of grass on that top layer. And I can take my move tool, and I can now bring this down, rotate it around, and kind of fit it into place. And then I can go back to my masking brush and, kind of mask out any little repeating patterns or anything that I wanted to do to get it to fit in. And then here's the cool part is I can click on that duplicate layer icon. I'll duplicate it one more time, and then I'll take my move tool and I'll just do the same thing because now I just have a copy of it. And then again, just kind of rotate it. I even stretched it a little bit. I went down there and stretched it because you would never know. It's just texture. All right. And then let's see here, go back to my masking brush. I can see there's a little bit of an edge all the way down at the bottom. I'm kind of circling it with my cursor right now. So I could paint over that with my masking brush, just at the bottom there. And then do it one more time if you have to. Make another copy of the layer, go to the move tool, and then just kind of move it down. And at this point, if you have to do, which I could probably, rather than keep on going, I could just go to my crop tool now and then just crop the whole entire image just to get that little corner out rather than make another copy. Or I could clone it. I mean, there's, I could probably do 3 different things to it. But to me, like that's a workflow changing modification to what we had inside ON1. If you think about what we would have had to do, we would have had to done before we had this, we would have had to go to layers. But as we added layers on top of this, it'd be really difficult to change, because let's say one of these layers here, let's say the shading's off, which I got lucky, the shading wasn't really off, but a lot of times it will be. And then you can make an area brighter or darker right down here. So it makes it a lot easier. Okay, so now, again, continuing with kind of what some of the workflow changes are. The next thing would be I thought it'd be kind of cool to replace the sky. So we will go over here. I'm going to click on this little plus icon over here, and that's going to add a layer on top of it. I happen to, this version of this photo right over here was actually taken on the same day, probably within an hour of me taking that last photo. So the sky and everything will actually look really, really good with it. Of course, you can go into the extras, and I'm going to demo that in a second here, because I want to show you one of the ways that I think really helps with, again, this new layered workflow that we have. So I'll go ahead and click on that and add that as a layer. So it's going to come in on top of the image here. Whenever I do my sky replacements, I always drag the layer to the very bottom of the stack. Okay. So what I'll get now is I have my version of the photo on top, and I've got the sky on the bottom. I don't know why, but for some reason my screen isn't going to update. Come on. Maybe turn it off. There we go. So apparently you have to drag it to the bottom and then turn a layer on and off to see it, but it is down there at the very, very bottom of the layer stack. So then I would go, all I need to do is reveal it, right? So then I would go to the layer that has the sky that I don't like on it. Click on that little mask icon there, sets me to my masking brush, and I'm automatically set to paint out mode. And then I'll just go in here and paint out. And you'll notice I picked an easy sky, and that's deliberate because I would be sitting here for 20 minutes masking in and out of the sky here. So I can give you some ideas of tools. I actually had a full tutorial on it in my my landscape course, but I can give you some ideas that turning the perfect brush on right up here, when you turn that on, as you get down there near the horizon or near the line that's going to mix the foreground and the background, that's going to help do the blend for you, because you can see half of my brush is actually over the bottom, but it's all being taken care of for me. Okay. Little workflow tip: when you don't need this turned on, turn it off, because what you're going to end up with is little holes and little splotchiness inside of your mask if you keep it turned on all the time. And it works a lot. It's a lot slower than just painting it this way. So when you don't need it, turn it off and do the easy stuff like I have been here. So only keep that setting on when you absolutely need it, because it just, again, you have little holes and chips and things coming out of your mask because it's doing some auto masking for you. I have my opacity by accident set to 85%, which is why I have to go over this again. There we go. Okay. And now what's cool about this is that I now have, if you look at my my layers panel here, I now have my sky on a layer right below. And sky replacements are probably one of the top things that I get asked about. The biggest thing with the sky replacement is it's got to fit in. And it's usually the hardest part of a sky replacement is not making the selection or the mask. The hardest part is finding a sky that works with your photo. And here's where, again, if you're thinking big changes, we saw what we could do with layers up here. If you're thinking the other big change, to me, I think this is even bigger than the previous one here. I can now adjust this sky and I can see it in the context of my photo. And that is where I think the biggest change inside ON1 2019 and the biggest workflow changes happened, because think about how we would have had to do this in 2018 or before. We would have had to take two different photos and go into layers, the layers module. All right. Once I got my sky replacement done, which would have been a very similar process to this, if that sky was too bright or too dark, I would have had to click on the develop module. It would have taken me to develop with just the sky. How am I supposed to figure out if the sky fits into the photo if I can't see the whole photo? If the whole point is I'm trying to get it to match, maybe I'm trying to get color to match, maybe I'm trying to get brightness to match, whatever. How am I supposed to see that when I can only see one element of the photo? So to me, this is probably, I'd said it in a thing that I wrote the other day. I think 2019 is probably the biggest update that I've ever seen from ON1, even bigger than in 2017 when Photo RAW came out as a raw editor. I think this is a bigger update because now we've got layers mixed in with all of our development effects and we can use them together. All right, big workflow change number 3. All right, and I think this one sneaks by people. So what do I do if I want to finish this off and apply some effects to it? All right, so I could go to effects, right? But if I apply an effect, like let's say I apply a black and white filter, I just made my sky black and white. Okay, I don't want to do that. If I click on the foreground layer and I add a filter, I'm going to make the foreground black and white or do whatever it is. So again, this is a whole different workflow, a whole different change, and a whole different way of thinking. So we can't go in here and add an effect to any one of these layers. So what we do is I'll go click on the top layer. And if you go up here to the very, very top of the screen here, you see the layer menu. What you do is you create a new stamped layer, okay? And that's gonna basically take what you're looking at on the screen and it is gonna copy that into a layer and put it at the top. Nice part is you still have your layers below. If you ever wanted to kind of get back, you still have everything below. But it's gonna take everything and kind of merge it and stamp it into a brand new layer at the top. I've got a few layers here. It's a little bit, seems to be a little bit time intensive. And I got the webinar software running too. And I know that always is a drain on the computer, but I can talk through it. So what you would see, or what you will see when this is done, is you're going to see a brand new layer here at the top. And it's basically a stamped version of everything that was under it. And once we get that stamped version of the layer, now I can go do effects. I can go do whatever I want, and it's going to get applied to the whole entire photo. Apparently, or apparently not. One of these days, this will. I always say, like, I think it kind of senses fear. It kind of knows, like, I've got an audience watching this, and it says, you know what, we're gonna take a little bit longer today just because of that. So I'll take a sip of water. Oh, there we go. Okay. So now there's that layer up there at the top. Now I can go and I can apply finishing touches to this. So what kind of things would I want to do? I'd probably go in here. I could add a little bit of a glow filter, I think would be nice. Crank up that amount setting. A little bit of a halo. So I think a little glow filter would be nice. Just kind of gives it a softening type of an effect. I would go up here and I would add some dynamic contrast and kind of increase a little bit of the medium and large and a tiny bit of the small details as well. Now, here's the, I really just want the dynamic contrast in the sky, all right? If you're thinking landscapes, I can tell you where people go wrong is they do this to the photo, all right? And we'll even make it worse. I see this all too much. All right, so it's obviously too much. You don't, it's okay to add a little bit of depth and dimension to your clouds, but you don't really want them to have a glow around them, and you don't really want them to have contrast around them. And it makes clouds almost look like too textured for me. So we want to make sure we pull that back. And then sometimes you will see a glow. I can go to my mask over here, click on that mask. And whenever I see, if you hear, I'll turn it off. Before and after. Wherever you see a dark blue glow, I'll just go in and kind of mask it out. And it's usually going to appear around the edges. And you can use a lower opacity to kind of blend the difference between the two. But that's the way to use dynamic contrast on sky. Is, very, very rarely can you just apply it and just have it done. You're almost always going to have to go in here and kind of get rid of some of that. But I do think it adds a little bit of depth to the clouds as well. All right. So if I turn it on and off, you'll still see it. That's before, and that's after. And then of course I don't have too much of it applied down here. I kind of like the way it looks down there. So that's a little bit of dynamic contrast. And then, of course, you know that you're never going to get away from a photo from me without throwing a big softy vignette, which is always too small and always too dark. So just kind of finesse the edges a little bit and not make it quite as dark, but I always make it a little bit bigger. And then if you look down on the bottom left corner of the vignette panel, you'll see a little anchor point. A lot of times I'll just take that and click over kind of my main subject. And that way it kind of focuses around there. So, and at this point, when you're done, all you got to do is click browse. The workflow is you don't have to save it as a PSD or a TIFF or anything like that. You just click browse, and ON1 is going to now create a brand new file. I think it's got a label like .on photo on it. And that becomes your new layer document. So the next time I could be in browse and click on it, I would come back into edit, and I'd have all these layers here, and all these masks and all these effects would still be in place. So that's kind of the new workflow that we have here. All right, so took a while here. I'll turn it over to Michael, see if we've got any questions happening.
Yeah, so audio is fixed over here, by the way, Matt, too.
Okay, good.
There are a couple questions about your color space that you use to start out your editing. Is there a specific one that you use when you begin your editing process, and then do you move to a different one if you're going to print or put that on the web instead?
When you're working on a raw file, you don't ever have to think about color space. Color space is not applied until you output your file, whether it's going to be for the web or for print or whatever it happens to be. And in that case, for the web, it's generally going to be sRGB. If I'm printing it myself, I don't change anything because I just send it to the printer. And then if I'm sending it to a lab to print, I always go to the lab's website and see what they recommend. But that decision really isn't made until you go into export. When you go into export mode or share mode, or not even share mode, but more so export, you don't really make that decision until you output the file. It's not something you'd ever have to decide on in the first step of the file.
Perfect. And yeah, no other questions right now, so keep on going. But just to remind everyone watching, this is being recorded. If you need to step out, feel free to do so. We'll have this posted on our blog and to our YouTube right after the recording. So yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, here. So let's see. One thing. So we got our layers. We got all that. Oh, here's what I wanted to do. I'm going to go ahead and I want to delete this top layer here, because I know I get a lot of questions on sky replacements. But here's why this layered concept works really well, because now I'm going to go down and click on that bottom layer here. I'm going to add a new layer, and I'm going to go into the extras folder. I'll go into ON1 extras, backgrounds, and then go into skies. So let's go find a different sky. And again, the hardest part of a sky replacement is to find a sky that actually fits and works. as we can tell from this photo, it's got to be something big, blue, puffy clouds. It's got to be something that kind of looks like it goes near horizon. You know, when you look at this sky, that is not a sky that was down near the horizon. That's a sky where somebody pointed their camera straight up in the air. So it's important to remember. That's again probably one of the biggest things I see in problems with sky replacements is you picked a sky that didn't necessarily fit. So let's try this one here, number 15. I'm going to add it as a layer. It's going to come in on top, and I'll just go to my move tool and extend it to fit the canvas. But what's really cool about that, and the way that we did this with layers, is now that mask is taking place. Now I can try out different skies. I can come in here. I can move that one around. Right? I can delete that layer or leave it there if I wanted to. And come down here, click on that little plus icon, go back into that extras folder and try, let's go crazy. Let's find something that's got a lot of blue to it. We'll try it. Add as a layer. Again, it's probably going to come in a little bit small. Just click your little expand to canvas there. And now I can maneuver that around. And then this gives me a real good way to demonstrate. So this color is off. I kind of like the clouds, but the color is off. Well, where would you change color? I just go over here to temperature. To me, it's a little bit magenta, a little bit purplish. So maybe go to green, maybe warm it. Probably even pull down the saturation a bit. Could even make it brighter. But it's really nice to have that ability now to finally go in there and make these changes and be able to see them throughout the image there. All right, Mike, I'm going to delete some layers here. It'll take me a minute to do. If any other questions inside there?
Yeah, there's quite a bit of questions actually. I'm trying to save the ones for you that are pertinent to the topic. Let's see here. Is there a specific format that you should use when you are adding your own skies to the extras? Or is there a specific thing that you look for, megapixel wise, anything like that for your own skies?
No, I mean, I try to just a JPEG, you know, the higher the megapixel, the better. But I mean, I stretch my skies all the time. Nobody's ever gonna, you know, it'd be one thing to have a photo of a mountain where, you were trying to stretch it, but it's, you know, a sky, you're never ever going to notice the loss in the detail there.
And then also, this is kind of on the same topic. Is there an issue using JPEGs and RAW images together? Obviously there's not, but if you could maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, the example we just saw was that was a RAW photo in the foreground, and it was a JPEG photo of a sky. So not that I know of.
So yeah, no other questions right now. Just a reminder to people, I'm answering the questions that are a little more not on topic with what Matt's covering here. But if you do have questions for Matt, feel free to throw it into that Q&A module, and I can pitch that up to him if it's something he can answer. If not, I'll just answer it right there for you. So yeah.
Cool. I saw, and I kind of poked into the questions there. I saw somebody that said, what is the anchor button for? That little anchor button in the vignette panel lets you control the center point of the vignette. It's basically what it does. So you can kind of wrap the vignette around wherever you click on with that anchor point is what that vignette will be wrapped around. All right, let's see here.
There's a question actually, Matt, from YouTube. Do you use a pen or a tablet when you do most of your editing?
Yes, I have a Wacom pen tablet. If you go to mattkay.com/gear, you can see the exact pen and tablet that I use. I saw Michael Eva asked, why do you always use a vignette? I always use a vignette because when a photographer in a studio that shoots with lights and lights their subject, A good studio photographer controls the lighting to light their subject and controls that lighting using various modifiers and whatnot, so that light then falls off and does not light everything around it. As a landscape photographer, we don't get to do that. So it's your job in post-processing to do that. And the vignette is usually the way that helps me get that. It's usually how I can direct your attention to what I want you to see in the photo. So again, studio photography, you have a little bit more control. Landscapes, you can't point a flash at the mountain. It's just not going to work. All right, let's see here. Let me share my screen again. All right, let's go take a look at. So we'll do a little bit of a kind of a just almost a start to finish type of an edit here. So here, pretty common scenario. We get a photo that's either going to be too bright in the sky, or it's going to be too dark in the foreground. So I'm going to use some combination. Some of my first stops along the way are generally going to be either exposure, midtones, highlights, shadows, somewhere inside of there. One of the things, and I don't get to talk about it enough, but one of the things for me is I kind of move the exposure slider to see what I have available in the photo. And that makes a difference to me. It makes a difference on how I'm going to edit the photo. I've got to see like, what's the range that I have? I obviously have all the shadow detail that I need here, but do I have enough highlight detail? And in this photo, honestly, guys, I'm kind of bordering on no. Something to look at. See, when I do this, see the sky over here? It might not be white, but it's now a level of gray, and you can look at your spike in this histogram over here. That kind of lets you know it was pretty much blown out. Okay, so it is a level of gray. I think I can get away with it. I think there's a couple of things we can do to help it a little bit, but just keep that in mind. Just because it's not the histogram isn't over here doesn't mean it's not blown out. That sky was blown out, but at least rocking this back and forth gives me an idea. Like, all right, I know I'm good on shadows. So what I would do is the path of least resistance, easiest work for me, which would be go to my local panel over here, bring the exposure down, and then use my adjustable gradient up here at the top and just kind of pop that in right along there. All right, and you can see I can kind of spread it out a little bit, kind of smooth that transition. All right, I kind of angle it just because I know, we have the angle of the hill over here. So it makes my job a little bit easier. To me, it looks a little bit more realistic than keeping it perfectly straight. The other reason that I angle it too is it'll give me more of the effect over here in the bright area and less of the effect over here in the dark area. All right. So we can pull back on our exposure. We can go over here and kind of pull back on the highlights a little bit. And then I can go down to my temperature and I can add a little bit of blue. And that'll help me with that blown out area, because again, no matter what I do, I will never get the detail back there. But I don't know about you guys. I have photos that, I might have just pointed my camera and taken a quick shot, and then I realized, it's later on that I don't quite have all the detail. I bracket much more now. This was taken quite a while ago. So I'm usually covered a little bit more these days, but I can go in here and kind of just, finesse that to get it to fit in. A couple other tricks for working on your sky here is you'll notice, I think it's doing good over here. As I turn it off, that's before, that's after. As I turn it off, it's affecting this area over here too much. It's getting too dark over here. So one of the things that we can do is you will notice there's a little gear icon that goes along with any layer that you have here. So whether it's a layer up here, or whether it's a local adjustment layer or even an effects filter layer. Any little layer that you got over here has a little gear icon. So I'm going to click on the gear, and then it opens up your blending options. And I can tell it, hey, I want you to maybe reduce the effect of whatever this layer is in the shadows. All right. So if you look at what it did two things actually. Number one, that filter was starting to kind of encroach over the mountain. Number two, it's starting to get dark over here. So I can say, hey, pull that away from the shadows. And that'll help that. Okay. Now, sometimes it gets a little bit too flat when you do that. Another place that you can go to is apply to. And then say, okay, apply this to only the highlights. And that works a little bit differently. Okay. Now it's really done. It's actually done a lot of auto masking for us. If you look at the difference, highlights versus all. So it's gone in there and done a lot of auto masking for us. Now, to me, when I do this, it gets a little bit artificial. Whenever you see a dark area with it kind of basically it's just a line, to me it's never going to look super realistic here. So give those a try. I can't give you a one fix, like a one click fix for all. I can basically walk you down the path of things that I look for. I'll try the sliders, I'll try the apply to, and then from there, if that doesn't work, then I'll go over here and I'll click back on my mask. And a lot of people don't know this, but when you did this adjustable gradient, okay, all it is a mask. You just did a mask with a gradient. There's nothing saying that I can't go up here and switch over to the brush tool and now work on this same mask. So if I were to brush over here, you're going to see that mask just changed, right? I'll click view over here. And you can see I'm actually changing the mask. I'm just changing it with one of these two tools, but it's just a mask, all right? So what I can do is I can set my brush to paint out mode, pull that opacity down, and that's even too much. So, I mean, pull the opacity way, way down here, maybe 10%. And now I can go in and I can kind of click and try to work. I'll usually try using the right bracket key here. Get a big, big feathered brush, start in that corner, and then let it feather itself out toward the edges there. So now I'm able to really go in there and kind of, hide it a little bit from the sky. I'll hit my left bracket key to make that even smaller, and then I'll paint over here on the mountain. Because I'm using such a low opacity brush, I know people are thinking like, well, how's he working on the edge? How come there's not a big halo or an edge or anything on there? I'm using a 10% opacity brush. So it's kind of hiding my tracks. If I did it with 100% opacity brush, you'd see a real dark line right along the edge of the mountain there. But because it's a low opacity brush, I'm basically just hiding my tracks all throughout there. I can just go over it and blend those two in. And that's really, for me, that's one of the best ways to blend any changes that you're going to do on the sky into the foreground here, is to really blend them together rather than make the perfect selection, because I think it just looks a lot more realistic that way. All right, let's see here. Thinking workflow perspective, we'll head back over to develop. And by the way, it's whether I'm in develop, whether I'm in effects, no matter where I am, I have access to my fix tools. And you have probably noticed the abundance of little spots in the sky up there. So I'd go through here, and the healing brush or the retouch brush is generally what I use for fixing spots. The magic eraser does it, but it just takes a little bit longer. Or if I go to that little retouch brush, it's just faster. All right. I hold down the space bar key. I can kind of pan around the photo here. Like so. Gosh, got spots everywhere. All right, before I fix all of them, I will stop. Looks good enough to me. If you ever have trouble seeing your spots, one of the things you could do is head to develop and then just crank your haze all the way to the left. And sometimes that makes it a little bit easier. Crank your structure all the way up. Sometimes that makes it easier too. And then just double click each name slider there and it resets it back to 0. All right, so we got rid of some spots inside of there. I think overall, like when it comes to our technical changes, which is what I usually do in Develop, and you'll notice Develop doesn't contain the color adjustments anymore. It doesn't contain the vignette. It doesn't contain the glow. It's really just got our technical changes. I could go to details, add a little bit of sharpening, but this is about the most thought I ever give to sharpening here. Crank it up. You really can't get into trouble with the amount slider here. If you ever wanted to over sharpen, we could do that in effects, but it's a very rare occasion where I want to do that. So we can crank up our amount here, and generally I'm going to crank it up almost as high as I can because again, it's the most thought I ever give to sharpening, and there's not too many, there's not too much that you can do with it. All right, so I think our sky's looking good. I think our foreground is balanced. From here, I would probably head into effects and then think about stylizing this thing. All right, so we'd go maybe down here, add a filter. A couple of my favorites would be sunshine. And I'd click the glow option, and that's going to give me a little bit of warming, and it's also going to give me a little bit of a glow. So that's one option. A couple other things that we can do if we want to add a little bit of a dynamic nature to the photo would be, so for me, the sun went behind a bank of clouds over here. You can kind of see that bank of clouds as it was setting there. As is the case every single time I am out on the coast in California, there's always that layer of clouds there. Just no matter what time of year it happens. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll go to local and I'll add another adjustment here, and I'll use that adjustable gradient. And this time I'll change it to the circular option. It's called vignette, but it's just basically a circle instead of a line. And then click. So now what's happening here is I am applying this circular gradient, and the effect is being applied in the middle of that circle, right? So I would increase the exposure a little bit, probably increase the warmth, not so much, but a little bit here, right? And then shape this thing to give me a little bit, doesn't have to be a lot. We're going to tone it down in a second, but kind of shape this thing to give me some type of directionality of light, just so this whole foreground here isn't so just blah, right? It just looks flat to me, okay? So we need to feather that out quite a bit. It's obviously too much, so we're going to pull that exposure down. You can even pull the highlights down inside of it. And then I can pull the overall opacity down. But honestly, you know what I would do? Because here's what I like about it. What I really like about it is I like that it's adding a little bit of, depth in here. It goes from dark to light to dark again, just gives it a little bit of depth. I don't like what it's doing over here in the sky. As you guys saw in that last example, nothing saying I can't come over here, click on that mask, and then take my brush, again, right bracket key, make it really big, really low opacity, and then just kind of click over here and kind of take it away from there. So at least if you take a look at the before and then the after, it just, again, I use the term depth. Anytime I can add that degree of depth and that change in light, and almost add the appearance that there was some warm light kind of maybe peeking through a cloud onto this area right here. Anytime I can do that, I think it kind of really improves the photo. All right, and then don't forget, guys, you also, I can't say I would do it on this one, but you have your sliders where you can hide it from the highlights. You've got your sliders where you can hide it from the shadows. You've got your apply to. So all of these can change the way that all interacts with each other. So I could say apply it to only the greens. We can give it a try. I don't know how it's going to work here. Or maybe let's try yellows. Let's see. And apparently that does nothing. So let's forget about that one. Change it back to all, but give those settings a try. They're going to work different on every photo. Again, the best I can do, I can't give you the formula, but I can hopefully lead you down the path of the things that I'm thinking about inside of here when I'm looking at these different sliders. Again, we were in effects before, so I showed you some of the filters, a couple other things. There's nothing wrong, and I would probably do it on this photo because I don't necessarily know that I have a finishing effect in mind for this. So when I don't know, that's when I go to presets. For me, presets are perfect for that. So I'll just click on, I'll just go over here, click on the landscapes section. And then up in that top right corner, you'll see the little grid icon. And that'll give me a full screen preview of what all these presets look like. And sometimes these give me an idea. Sometimes they give me an idea that I didn't have before. That's kind of cool. Kind of like that one. So it's kind of almost you'd see it's kind of got a warming, almost brownish type of a tone filter to it. Let's see here. Golden Hour Sunshine is another one to give a try. That's going to be too bright, but of course, don't forget, guys, you always have opacity. I can tone down the opacity. Any one of the filters or the entire filter stack inside of there. So I can kind of see what's causing this to get too bright over here. Kind of run through some of these. Tone enhancers probably doing it too. And kind of run through there and kind of fix them, or just, again, pull back on the entire opacity of the whole stack inside of there. So we can, filters are the presets are a good place to go. What's another one that I like for? We can try cinematic. A desaturated look would look neat here too. So I won't spend too much time. Glow Baby, you gotta love it. Some of the names of these things almost looks like a painting, doesn't it? So that's a direction you could go to as well. I won't go through. I think the last thing I would really do here is make sure I add the vignette, because I do think this photo really needed it. There's a lot going on, and I would love to tone your attention away from the edges and just bring you into this area right there in the middle. From a workflow perspective, if you guys are wondering, so what's we have develop, we have effects. Why did all these settings leave develop and now they're inside of effects? And that's because it's a good separation. If I ever wanted to just kill all of the creative aspect of it, I could hit reset, and my develop is still here. Right? So it hasn't messed with my develop yet. I'd have to hit reset and develop or reset all to do that. So it just kind of keeps a nice separation of everything between the two. And of course, if you hit the backslash key, that is your before and that is your after. Mr. Michael Morelli, I think we're about wrapping up. Those were kind of my big demos for the thing, and I wanted to save some time for some questions too.
Yeah, there's a ton of questions in here. I'm sure you're seeing them as you cruise this Q&A module.
Yeah, so do you have to go to browse to save what you've done? Yeah, that's how you save what you did. So I'll click on browse.
Awesome. There was also a couple questions on white balance, how you go through your white balance process, setting that after the fact.
I go through my white balance process generally by going down here to all of the presets and hovering through and seeing which one looks best. I can tell you for the most part, I'm going to end up in a cloudy, shady area in white balance, or I'm just going to warm it up myself just because I tend to, I'm more of a warm photo editor. So that's usually where I end up.
And there's also a question on creating a version or virtual copy. Do you have a preference? Do you work on the original? Do you work on a virtual copy more? Looks like a lot of people are using the virtual copies there from what I saw in the QA.
Yeah. The only time I would use a virtual copy would be is if all of a sudden, I wanted to see what a black and white of this photo looked like. Then I would go and create then I could go in and create a version of it. Go into edit and, add go up here and add a filter for, black and white. And then what that would do for me, if I go back to browse, hit G for grid, then I would have two different versions of the photo. I'd have my color photo and I have my black and white photo to compare next to each other. But whether it's RAW or JPEG, you're working on the original doesn't necessarily, like, you're never harming the original. I could always come back here and click reset and it would reset everything. So I only use versions when I want to actually, see two different versions of the photo.
Awesome. And then there's a couple questions here. Let me just find that on tone and color. Back in develop, do you ever use the auto? Do you, I guess I should rephrase that. When you start your tone and color process, where do you start? Do you start with the auto key or do you just start moving from top to bottom in develop?
I personally move almost from top to bottom. I only use auto if I'm in a pinch for time, but here's my thought process. I didn't spend upwards of thousands and thousands of dollars on camera gear. And I didn't spend, whatever the cost of whatever software you're using and all of the sliders that come with the software that you're using to click an auto button. For me personally, these are things I like to do. Now, there's if I'm in production mode, like where I've gone and done a shoot and it's more not for my personal work, but it's more for, whatever, a client or something like that, and I'm in production mode, yeah, you can bet I'm going to use auto as much as I can to save myself time, because I don't enjoy production work. I don't enjoy work of going in there and cropping 100 photos and toning 100 photos for, whatever, if it was an event one night. But for my personal work, I generally stay away from auto.
All right, great. So there's a couple other questions about creating stamped layers and using basically the order of stamped layers and editing the layers below that and having it affect the stamped layers. I don't know if you want to talk about that at all here.
Yeah, I mean, it's if I make a stamped layer, it'd be a little bit tough to do right now. I mean, I can add it here. Let's go add. Let's just do an example that doesn't actually make sense, but so let's say this is my document and I go in here and I do a new stamped layer, and that layer is going to go on the very top eventually. Come on, there we go. If I go in here and I add an effect to it, like a black and white effect, that effect is added to that layer up here. No matter what I do to these layers below, if I can go down here to the sky layer and I will now move it over to the right, you're not going to see it. I did, but you're not going to see it because you created a stamped layer, which is basically covering everything on the top there. The layer still exists below. So if you ever needed to basically delete the stamp layer and say, hey, you know what, let me start this over again, you can go and you can do that. But there really would be no, there'd be no backtracking from what you did on the stamp layer with the layers below it.
All right, awesome. Well, I think that's all we have time today for.
Hey, Michael, can there's a few in here I can see. I can probably blow through them pretty quick.
Go for it. If you got time, man, go for it.
Yeah. Let's see. John said, how do you use the threshold slider and sharpening? Threshold kind of, if you think of, if I was sharpening this photo right here, think of, let's go ahead and crank it up. And by the way, guys, one of the things I always suggest to people, get a photo, zoom in, and if you're ever not sure, like start cranking up sliders and see the difference. It's a really good way to learn. But in this photo here, sharpening would hit all the little nooks and crannies. Threshold would hide it from your continuous tone flat areas. Okay, so it's almost kind of like a masking setting. It's just going to hide it from the sky, and if there was skin in the photo or whatnot, that's what threshold would do. Let's see here. Pamela, how do you make your landscape look like a painting? You probably need another program to do that. Ed said, do you go to browse to save what you did? Yes, that's how you save. There is no save. There's no file save. right? You just go to browse and that saves all your progress. Howard, can you print from here? Yep, you'd go File, Print, and print from there. Let me see here. Would you denoise this? I barely denoise anything because you'll never see it when I share it online, and printing for the most part will get rid of most of your noise. Ronald, that's a good one. Does a preset overwrite any previous editing? So that's a really good question, Ronald, because presets, when I go over here to effects, let's say I go and I add a and let's say let me add a filter to this, like black and white. And then I'll add the cold and crisp preset. You can watch. It's basically going to go over and it kills all the stuff that I did. So when you add a preset, yeah, you are saying replace every filter that I just added with whatever's in this preset. Now, there's a little trick, and that's why I thought this was such a good question, is if I click on Blue Dawn now, it'll wipe out cold and crisp. But if I right click on Blue Dawn and I choose Insert Preset, it'll actually add that preset and keep whatever I did before. So that's how you can keep. If you added filters and you want it, and this is horrible, so let's hit reset. If you added a filter here, like a black and white filter, and then you see a preset over here that you want to use, just right click on it and choose Insert, and that'll keep the filters that you have over here. All right, I think, let's see here. How do you select and group those layers from David? You cannot select and group those layers. And then let's see here. Go back to browse. That looks like we got most of them inside of there that we could answer inside of this one. Kathy, I'm not an ON1 employee, Kathy, but I will tell you this. Kathy Dobby asks, is there an ON1 2019 manual out there somewhere? The manual that you guys have online kicks butt. I went and looked at it the other day because somebody had asked me a question and I wanted to post it to him, or I wanted to answer him. But I think if you go on the ON1 website and you just do the search bar for user manual, they've got a really, really good user manual for 2019 out there.
Yeah, just on the support page, on1.com/support, there's a user guides tab on there. So anyone who's looking to get that manual user guide, just head over to on1.com/support, and there is a user guides tab there.
All right. I think like 3 more I'll take, Michael, and then we'll call it. Steve Golton said, been watching your webinars for a while. Usually do blacks and whites. Yeah, I do blacks and whites a lot of times by holding down in ON1, I believe it's the J key when you're adjusting your white point and your black points. Honestly, see, I wish I could tell you it was anything other than mood. I looked at the photos today and I didn't really think they needed it, and I wasn't in the mood to do it. So let's see here. Don said, we're in the process. Would you apply any LUTs? Don, you can. I think of a LUT as a finishing touch. So that's where I would go to the LUT filter. David said, do you still catalog in Lightroom? So you can use ON1 as a plugin to Lightroom, or you can use ON1 as a standalone. So yeah, if you wanted to still do your cataloging in Lightroom, then jump over to ON1 as a plugin. You can do that. Okay. All right. I think we'll call it there. I saw some copyright metadata stuff, not too landscapey, but that would all be done inside of Browse, and you can set your copyright and metadata inside of there. All right. Sound good, Michael?
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I think that'll just about wrap it up for us. So just a reminder to everyone, this is being recorded. We'll have it posted up on our blog here shortly after this. Thank you guys so much for being with us here today. Matt, any parting words for everyone?
Can I do a shameless plug for my course?
Of course you can.
I actually just last Tuesday released a 4-hour-long ON1 essential guide to landscape editing. So if you guys want to check it out, it's over at mattkay.com/on1landscape. And if you're watching this webinar, my guess is you've probably already been bombarded by emails about it anyway. So the sale goes through to tomorrow, though. So it is about to end, and you save a bunch of money and get some cool bonuses. So if you are interested, go check it out. Again, matk.com/on1landscape. Thank you guys for thanks for joining me today too. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and thanks so much.
All right, thanks, Matt. Thanks for being here with us today. I'm going to go ahead and close the meeting right now. Everyone have a great day.
Take care.